Hey everyone, Theo here. Today I want to share with you some common urban sketching mistakes that you should avoid. And I am featuring the sketches that I have made during the Urban Sketches Symposium, which are in this sketchbook. By the way, I've already made the sketchbook tour video, so do watch that if you have not. So let's start with the first mistake, not placing the horizon line at the correct level and not having a proper composition. So this was my first try for this sketch inside the church, and after I drew this straight away I knew that something was not right because I drew this too high up on the page. This should actually be placed further down, because if I draw this too high up on the page, it means that I will not have space to draw things that are above, such as the roof. So even though I drew the arch first and I felt that something was wrong, I actually continued to draw this by adding some more details. But the thing is, when you place the first few lines and it's kind of off, chances are all the lines that you add later, all the details that you add later are not going to be in the correct position because the first few lines are already wrong. By the way, this is how the interior of the church looks, and unfortunately this is the only photograph that I have of the interior. So before you start sketching, I highly recommend you take reference photos first so that you can use them for, well, reference later on. So I stopped that sketch and decided to create a few thumbnails just to test out different compositions, just to understand the perspective a bit more, and also to find out which are the challenging areas that I need to take note of before I sketch. So this is the second try, and I actually placed this a bit lower, but this should actually be placed much lower and drawn much smaller. So you can see the top of the arch starts here with the first try, and for the second try I placed this much lower, and the third try, oh, there's actually a fourth try here. For the third try I placed this even lower, and this was drawn slightly smaller as well. Now inside the church, at the wall on the far end, there is actually a window just above the cross. Now this window is not directly underneath this arch here. So this is the highest point of the arch, and this window is actually offset by one window's width from the center line here. So for my sketch, you can see this is almost directly beneath the arch, the tallest point here. So this is definitely wrong. The perspective for this is definitely wrong. So with this sketch, I tried to move the window further a bit more to the right side and just draw some perspective lines to see how the beams go into the vanishing point, which is here. So after making several mistakes, by this time I have a better idea of how the perspective works. And you may notice there is this rectangle here, which I actually use as a measuring tool. So the arch looks like this, and at this point between the top and bottom, there is this divider here, which is the top of the pillar before it goes into the arch. So I'm actually using this rectangle to get the midpoint here. You can see that rectangle here as well. The interior space of this church was quite challenging to draw, and I was overconfident, so I went straight with ink. On hindsight, I probably should have brought along a pencil so that I can create some drafting lines to test out the composition. Or I can create some thumbnails first before I start with the main sketch. So let me show you how I created this thumbnail. So I drew this vertical rectangle first and divided the long lines into half. So this is where the pillar will stop. And this is the top point of the arch. And once I have this, I managed to find the vanishing point, which is somewhere here. There is actually a plant here, so I actually drew the plant here. And there is this center line that goes down to the vanishing point. And there's this line that goes down to the vanishing point as well, and this is the back wall. So this is the back wall, and just below the back wall, just right at this midpoint here, we have the top of this window, which is one window above this window. So when you're drawing, you should always be constantly measuring the distance between different objects. So this is half, and we have this, which is 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. So after you have drawn this window, you will be able to fill in the little details within the window. And after you have drawn this shape here, you can draw the diagonal lines down to create those beams. So far, the only perspective fundamental that I have used is drawing the diagonal lines to the vanishing point. So to draw the beams, I just draw those lines pointing to the vanishing point. So this beam, which is directly above the VP, will be perfectly vertical. And I can draw another beam here. The angle of this second beam is between this and this. So if I draw another beam here, I can actually use the angle here and the angle here to help me get this angle. Or I don't need these two, I can just draw this angle straight down like this to the vanishing point. And I will just divide, draw in between those lines that I have already drawn. In this case, I'm actually drawing from my imagination. So if you're drawing this on location, you will have to count how many beams there are. And there may be a beam here as well. Once you are able to draw this, by that time you probably would have made many mistakes, which is great because making mistakes during the thumbnailing stage is alright compared to making those mistakes when you are drawing your actual sketch that you want to paint later on. So once you have this, you can divide the walls on the side. Just make sure you measure the distance correctly, because as the walls move closer to you, the spacing will become larger and larger. So there is an arch here. I'm going to use this midpoint here so that I can draw the top of the arch. So let me place the bottom of the pillar first. The bottom of this pillar, let's just put it here. And the bottom of the other pillar, if you draw a imaginary diagonal line here, you will see that this line will go to the VP, so the bottom of this pillar will be here. Let's just draw it further in a bit because I'm running out of space on the left side. So this is the pillar, this is the top, and we can join this point here to the top, like this. So this is where the arch will start to go up, and there is this imaginary diagonal line that you have to imagine as well. So this arch here will start here and go up to the top and come down like this. And we have another imaginary line here. And once you have drawn this, you will be able to draw the little details within these shapes very easily. Because my vanishing point is here and I'm standing somewhere here looking at the vanishing point, I can see more of the walls and pillars and arches on this side. But if I walk to this side of the church so that I can be close to the pillars, I will be able to see more of this side. But since I'm standing here, which means the pillars on the right side are squashed together, the most important thing when it comes to drawing the forced perspective is the distance between the pillars. So this can be one pillar, and the second pillar can be like this, and the third pillar can be like this. So what you need to take note of here is the width of the pillar. So the width of this A versus B here versus C. So as the pillars are closer to you, the pillars will be much thicker and wider. So you have to make sure you get the difference with the width accurate. And you also have to pay attention to the space, this space between the pillars. So this space between pillar A and B is very small, but the space between pillar B and C is much wider. And you can use pillar B as a measuring tool. So maybe this space here is the same width as pillar B, so you can just draw this pillar C one pillar away from pillar B. So this interior one-point perspective scene is not easy to draw. Drawing this requires knowledge of one-point perspective and also placement. By placement, I mean where should you place the window within the shape. If you place it here, is it correct? Or if you place it directly beneath the arch, is that more correct? So the placement from observation drawing is very important. Another very common mistake is running out of space while drawing. Let's say this is your sketchbook and you are drawing the interior of the church again. If you have drawn the arch too big like this, then everything else will have to be drawn bigger. So chances are you are going to run out of space. So it's best to draw this, your subject, smaller so that you can fit more details later on. So this is the same sketchbook, but if you have drawn the arch maybe about 1/3 of the size, maybe this small like this, now you have more space to draw the roof, and you have more space to draw the pillars on the side. Yeah, you just have more space because you started small. That's why everything else later can be drawn smaller and can fit on the page. After you have more experience with urban sketching, you will know whether you are someone who draws big or small, and you can adjust accordingly. So if you are someone who likes to draw big, then just try to draw smaller next time. Another common mistake is not placing the horizon line at the correct level. So this first try is a combination of 3 mistakes: not placing the horizon line lower, drawing this too big, and I had some positioning issues with this window below the arch. So let's talk about horizon line. If you are standing on the ground, then the horizon line will be low. The horizon line will actually be your eye level. So when you're standing on the ground, you can look up at the roof. So you will be able to see the roof. So in this case, for this sketch, the horizon line is here. I was standing here. This is my eye level. So as I look up, this is what I see. But if you place the horizon line further up, maybe let's say you are standing on the 2nd floor of this church, it means your eye level is here as well. And because you are at a high level, you can see down. And if you can see down, it means you can draw things that are on the first level. So if you are on the ground, you can see up, but if you place your horizon up, that means you are somewhere higher up, you look down. So where the horizon line is actually very important. Another mistake that I make, or maybe it's not a mistake, it's more of a habit, is I like to draw like really fast because I usually don't have much time. So for example, with this sketch, which was drawn inside a cafe, and Ben, my friend, was having this food sketching workshop. So I wanted to draw all the students very quickly because I don't have much time. So for this quick sketch, my goal or the priority really is to get the shapes of the hair right, make sure they have recognizable hairstyles, and also make sure that the clothes look right. As for the facial features, you can see they are very stylized. When I don't have time to sketch, usually my faces are drawn with this very cartoony style. For the eyeballs, I would just draw them with little dots, and I would try to place the dots within the spectacles or the frames so that they are in the correct location. And for some other eyes, I may just use quick strokes like this, and for nose, it's like this, it's a V. Sometimes I don't draw the mouth, and you can see the coloring is very quick as well, very quick and sketchy. And I'm not bothered to keep the colors within the shape. But I will try to at least create some highlights to give an idea where the light source is coming from. And here I did not wait for the paint to dry. I painted the face first, if I remember correctly. And while the face was still wet, I painted the color of the shirt, so the colors blend into the face, and it doesn't look that great. Same here. Here I tried to rescue the face by using tissue to clean out the gray or dark color. So that's why you see this part here, it's kind of washed out. When I sketch people quickly, I like to draw the heads first, followed by the hands and then the clothes. The reason for that is because hands are always moving. So when I see someone place his or her hands in a position and I don't expect the hands to move, I will quickly just draw the hands. So after drawing the hands, I can draw the clothes, because it's much easier to draw the hands when you have a reference, when you have a model in front of you, compared to drawing clothes, because you can actually just draw the clothes based on your imagination. But for hands, the position of the hands can be quite difficult, quite challenging to draw, so it's always good to have that reference, which is why I always draw the hands first if I see the hands are not moving much. So this sketch is quite stylized and cartoony, and if you are someone at the table, you may not be able to recognize yourself unless you can identify or recognize your clothes or your hairstyle. Let me show you another sketch of more people. This was drawn at a meeting, and the meeting was very long, so I had a lot of time to draw this. And because I had a lot of time to draw, I could really study the facial features and place them where they need to be. So if I look at my sketches now, if I look at all these people, I can actually recognize them compared to the earlier sketch that you saw on the previous page where the people are not that recognizable. Here the facial features are more recognizable. And this is because I have more time to sketch. I really like this sketch, even though it's a sketch of a very mundane scene of a meeting. I like this sketch because I was able to slow down and just enjoy the sketching process and just absorb the moment of being present. So I love this sketch a lot. Before I show you the mistake for the next sketch that I drew, let me show you the scene that I was trying to draw, and it's this scene of the Auckland waterfront. So this is a very challenging scene, obviously, because there are so many details, so many buildings, and you really have to think about how you approach this. And this is my sketch, the first try. Can you see what's wrong? The drawing of this sky tower actually looks right. It's just that the size is wrong. Because I drew this too big, I won't have space to draw all the other buildings in front of the sky tower, and I certainly will not have the space to draw the water in front of the building. So after I drew this and this, straight away I knew I drew this like way too big. So for my second try, I actually drew this much smaller. So this is how big it was, and this is much smaller. And because this was drawn smaller now, I'm able to fit all the other buildings here and size them in relation to the sky tower. If you compare the buildings in the photo or in the scene versus what I have drawn here, you will realize that I did not draw all the buildings, and also some of the buildings are drawn very differently compared to what's shown in the actual scene. So this sketch was drawn like really quickly. I just drew the shapes of the buildings. I did not even draw the windows. The windows are represented by these little dots and sometimes the horizontal lines or the horizontal white lines, and the beams sometimes are represented with this very sketchy lines or with the white lines. And here at the bottom, you don't even see the individual windows. It's just this horizontal shapes painted with watercolor. And we have some vertical beams here and horizontal windows. You don't really see the shapes of the trees that clearly. And we have more windows here. Now when drawing the windows, I try to at least follow the perspective. So you can see the windows for this wall, which is facing me. The lines are kind of horizontal, but for the windows on the side, they are affected by perspective, so I try to tilt the lines slightly. And that applies to the grid of windows here on this wall versus on this side of the building. So I try to mix and match the use of black as windows and also white as windows. This is the shadow side of the building. So what's the mistake here? Well, I can't even say what's the mistake because I can't say the composition is wrong, the colors are wrong, the scaling is wrong, the perspective is wrong. When I look at this sketch, it looks alright. It's just that when I was drawing this, I was drawing really quickly. I did not draw the details. I was just drawing like blocks of shapes with the intention to add details with those little dots, the white gel pen and watercolor later on. So I actually did not want to draw the windows with ink, like draw little rectangles with ink. And when I completed the sketch, everything looked very bare. It looks very unfinished. So at that point, I thought I had made a mistake because it looks unfinished. But after I added the watercolor, added like one wash of watercolor for the sky, for the buildings, for the water, and added subsequent layers of watercolor or details for the windows, and additional details for with the white gel pen and spots of colors, and I also used Posca markers to add little details here and there. The sketch, the unfinished sketch that I thought was unfinished earlier, now looked alright, which surprised me. So I'm actually quite pleased with this sketch, even though initially I thought this was going to turn out to be a disaster. I think what really helps is the composition and the scale. If you are able to get the composition right, if you are able to get the scale and the general shapes of the subjects right, you can add details to help you enhance or make the sketch look better later on. But if you get the scale or the composition or the perspective wrong right at the start of the sketch, all those details that you add will not matter. So I think that's why this sketch worked. If you take a look at this sketch, I'm not that satisfied with this sketch because it looks kind of unfinished. I certainly could have added more details here, and I definitely could have added more details to this building here. The thing is, if you are drawing something big, like a building or something up close where you can actually see the details, you may have to add the details to whatever you're drawing. Otherwise, the sketch can look unfinished or incomplete. But if you are situated much further from your subject and you can't really draw those details, you can suggest those details instead of draw all those details. So that's why I like this sketch versus this sketch, which looks to me kind of unfinished. This was my last sketch at the symposium, and I love this sketch mostly because I had the time to just slow down and sketch and just enjoy the moment. So the coloring here is more precise. I was able to color within the shapes, and the perspective looks alright. The only issue I have is with the plane here. I knew I was drawing the plane. I knew I had to be very careful with the front of the plane, but I drew this diagonal line for the front, so yeah, I was quite upset. So I started this sketch here, then move on to the left to draw the plane, and that's where I made the mistake. So at that point in time, I actually wanted to stop and just draw the scene again on a new page, like I did with the interior sketch of the church. But I decided to continue, and I'm glad that I continued sketching because the composition for this is alright. The perspective looks alright. The proportion looks alright. So all those fundamentals actually are alright. It's just the little details are a bit off, and I'm really glad to complete this sketch because now when I look back at this sketch, I'm quite satisfied. And I like this because I had the time to just slow down and sketch and enjoy the moment. So even though I made a little mistake that I will remember for the rest of my life, I still like this sketch a lot. If you are wondering what paint I use here to create this granulation, it's cobalt blue dip with burnt sienna on hot press watercolor paper. Let's talk about the last mistake that I really hate, which is to use a dirty brush to paint the shadow side of skin tones. Skin tones or faces look best when you use vibrant colors. I believe I use yellow ochre with slight warm red for this color and for the color blend. So I use the same color here, but when this was dried, I wanted to paint the shadow side, and I believe my brush was not clean completely. So it probably had some blue in it, which is why you see this very dull, muted skin tone color, which does not look vibrant and really kills the vibrancy of the skin tone. Because when you mix a color that you like and you go on to wash the paint off the brush and then you try to mix that color again with your second try, the second mix is not going to look the same as your first try, usually. When it comes to urban sketching, don't be afraid to make mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the faster you will improve, provided that you know that you actually made a mistake and you can actually improve on that. The only bad sketch that you can make with urban sketching is a sketch without a story. So as I flip through all the sketches that I have drawn, all the sketches actually have a story behind, and I will be able to remember the stories, the feelings that I have when drawing on location at that point in time when I made these sketches. So I love all these sketches, just that I like some more than the others. But all these sketches have story, and that to me is the most important thing. So that's the main difference between urban sketching versus drawing from a reference photo. When you're drawing from a reference photo, there is no story behind because you're not there on location to really experience the scene, the sights, the sound, and you definitely don't have the company of your friends who are sketching beside you. Alright, I hope this video is useful. Before you go, I want to ask you to support me on Patreon so that I can continue to make more videos such as the one you've just watched on my YouTube channel. Your help on Patreon is a huge help to me. See you guys in the next video. Bye!